We can now bring in Steve Hewitt, Senior Lecturer in American and Canadian Studies at the University of Birmingham. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. In his victory speech, Mark Carney said Donald Trump is trying to break us. How does the Prime Minister handle the tricky task of fixing the cost of living crisis in Canada and at the same time not alienating the United States, a country he needs if he doesn't want the economic situation in Canada to go from bad to worse?
It's going to be a very difficult situation for the next few months. You also have a rookie politician. I mean, he was elected for the first time ever, as it was mentioned in the report, at age 60. So he doesn't have a lot of political experience beyond his work as the governor of Bank of Canada and the governor of the Bank of England. So it's going to be a case of having to deal with Donald Trump and the Trump administration, recognizing that Canada, to a large extent, is economically dependent on the United States, has been for decades. Geographically, it's one of the things that has driven that relationship. But obviously, the tariffs will have an impact on the cost of living, which was one of the reasons why it appeared the Liberals were heading to defeat up until January of this year.
At the start of this year, Liberals were set for that crushing defeat. Would they have come out on top if Justin Trudeau was leading the ticket? Or do people simply have faith in Mark Carney, given that he has this background in macroeconomics?
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm a historian. If you look at the last few decades, since the 1980s, Canadian governments have gone about 9 or 10 years, and then you've had a switch of parties. So that cycle was ending with Trudeau in 2025, and everything seemed to indicate there was going to be a conservative victory, a massive victory, and possibly the Liberals reduced to a third-party status. So I think it is a combination of things. It was about Trudeau going and not being replaced by someone already in that government. So it was a fresh face. And then the major factor is Donald Trump, his rhetoric, the threats of tariffs, especially in English-speaking Canada. So much of the Canadian identity is around rejecting the United States, even to a certain extent anti-Americanism. And Trump plays directly into the sort of stereotypes that some Canadians have of a kind of crass, bullying American. And that just obviously did not play well.
It sounded like the Conservatives fared poorly yesterday, did they? Because they got an estimated 41% of the seats in Parliament. What does that mean that the Conservatives were able to make such inroads?
Yeah, especially in the province of Ontario, where actually I'm from originally, they exceeded expectations. And I think that reflected cost of living. I have a child who lives in Ontario who, does not own a home, and it would be difficult for him to purchase a home anytime soon because of the cost of living. So I think the Conservative vote, which went up, and I think the two parties, this is the first election in Canada at the federal level that two parties got over 80% of the vote since I think the 1950s. So that did show there is a lot of discontent, a lot of unhappiness about cost of living coming out of COVID. It's the kind of thing that we've seen elsewhere. It's obviously had an impact in the US with the defeat of the Democrats. It had an impact in the United Kingdom with the defeat of the Conservatives. So you've seen these incumbent governments affected by the cost of living coming out of COVID. And so again, in a sense, Canada bucked the trend, even though the Conservatives improved on their showing 4 years ago.
How does Mark Carney and the Liberal Party bring the country together by working with smaller parties and not really alienating Conservative voters?
I think they're at the moment, it's still not clear whether they may end up with just a small majority, but certainly they're in position, given the help of the new Democratic Party that they relied on over the last 4 years. They are in position to have a working majority in the House of Commons. So in that sense, they don't need directly Conservative support. But obviously, going forward, I assume Carney would like to be reelected at some point down the road. And, he's taken a more moderate, more centrist approach than Trudeau did. And so there is a potential for him to kind of pull away possibly some of those Conservative voters, particularly in the province of Ontario, where about 40% of Canada's population is.
The French President Emmanuel Macron put out a statement on X saying he's looking forward to working with Mark Carney, elbow to elbow, he said. And then we had Ursula von der Leyen, who says the bond between Canada and Europe is strong and growing stronger. Is this what we can expect to see with Mark Carney's premiership, that Canada and the Europe will forge stronger ties, even though there's that huge geographical distance between the two?
I think definitely. sure there are many European leaders very happily celebrating today the election in Canada, particularly given the circumstances with the sorts of threats that Trump made towards Canada, and obviously he's made them towards Greenland and Panama. And so, I mean, I'm sure Canada, again, because of its dependence on the U.S. economically, is looking to shift trade. It won't be easy, but obviously the EU is one possible way of shifting not only trade, but also building stronger relations in general as a way of reducing Canada's dependence on the United States.
Now, G7 leaders will be gathering in Alberta, Canada, I believe in the middle of June. How does Mark Carney build bridges with Donald Trump, who we will have to invite to that gathering, while at the same time getting the U.S. president to drop his ambitions of making Canada the 51st U.S. state?
Again, this is such a tricky situation because the United States is 10 times the size of Canada. It is a very powerful country. Canada is economically dependent on the U.S. So despite the rhetoric during the election, Carney will obviously have to look to mend fences, to at least make some effort to reach out to Trump. I assume the fact that he's not Justin Trudeau, and there seemed to be particular animosity on the part of Trump towards Trudeau. In fact, the last time the G7 was in Canada, Trump, before leaving Canada, blasted Trudeau on social media. So I think that will help Carney, the fact that he's a new face and, an older, someone closer in age to Trump. And he just, for practical reasons, the same reason you see Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom having to reach out to Trump. People just can't afford to completely alienate the United States.
We have China that's put out a statement as well earlier today saying it's ready to improve ties with Canada after Mark Carney's win. Clearly, Mark Carney will have to reset relations with Beijing because relations with China under Justin Trudeau were not that warm, were they?
No, there's been a massive issue in Canada over the last few years, not only with China, but also with India around what's called foreign interference, that Beijing, New Delhi have been interfering in Canadian politics. But again, it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that Canada, if they want to wean themselves in a sense off the United States, they're going to have to look elsewhere, not only to Europe, but possibly to China as well.
We'll see how things pan out. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us on the program. Steve Hewitt there.